Hi, I'm Justin A. Reynolds, and I'm here to talk about Miles Morales in Shockwaves, the upcoming graphic novel with Scholastic and Marvel. I was super excited to work on this project, not least of all because it gave me the opportunity to tell a story, an original story from the point of view of my favorite Marvel character, Miles Morales. And not just that, I got to be in the minds of his family, Rio and Jeff, and also really dive into his community, that in Brooklyn, where he of course lives, but also kind of his extended community via Puerto Rico, where his mother hails. And so the opportunity to kind of connect those pieces culturally through Miles Morales kind of swinging through and saving the day in multiple ways was too good to be true. And so I'm so fortunate that I got to work on this, and I hope you all love it as much as I do. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Weng T. Vang, and I'm the author of Wishes.
And I'm Victor Knight, the illustrator of Wishes.
When I was just a baby, my family left almost everything and everyone we knew to find a new home and a better life. Our experience as migrants and refugees is the inspiration for this story. And even though Wishes is inspired by my family's experience, our story is not unique. It is told again and again, every day around the world.
Home is a central theme in Wishes, being uprooted from it and the wish to build another one somewhere else, somewhere safe. In order for readers to feel the sense of displacement, loss, and hope in the story, the pages need to carry the warmth, tactility, and beautiful imperfections of home. And that's what I tried to achieve with the illustrations. We wanted to show that with the art on the outer case. These children represent those who have been forced to flee their homes throughout history.
It took 4 years to make this book, and we hope it shows. We hope that Wishes opens hearts and minds and helps make the world a little bit safer,
A little bit kinder,
and a little bit
more beautiful.
My name is Gracie Zhang, and Lala's Words is my first book as author and illustrator. Lala's Words is a story of the relationship between a mother and daughter and how you can create your own magic words that affect others around you and your community. I worked with ink and gouache paints to create Lala, writing it out, then drawing it, then rewriting, then redrawing. It's a story very close to me because it was inspired by the relationship between my mother and I, as well as her own family. It's easy to disregard how we talk to the ones closest to us, that sometimes we need a reminder, maybe in the form of leafy green plants and weeds, that the small moments we have can truly impact us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Scholastic event. We are so happy to be with you this year. We can't be with you in person. We can't be cheersing you with margaritas or Bloody Marys or any of our other delightful mocktails or cocktails. But we are doing so from afar and virtually. We are so excited to share with you some awesome authors, some awesome books, and a really wonderful time.
Thanks, Emily. I am equally excited. Hello, everyone. I'm Lizette Serrano. I'm so grateful we continue to connect in this digital age. As Emily mentioned, her mock cocktails, this made me reminisce of past events. The last time we were in person was in 2019 in Austin, Texas. We heard powerful stories from Amy King, Lamora Giles, and Aida Salazar. Then back then, 2018, we introduced you to Australian author Erin Blabely, and we all celebrated being bad guys and rock cool sunglasses and spy gear. That year also brought us a new book from master storyteller Christopher Paul Curtis, and we introduced a new author to you. Her name was Sayantani Dasgupta. So we're just so grateful for your support over the years. I know we'll be back together, but we're able to connect now, here and now, and do what we love most, is celebrating our authors and new stories. So talking of that, so 2017, San Antonio, our event featured someone you know well, Gordon Korman, introducing his novel at the time, Restart. Gordon Korman has been a part of the Scholastic family for a long time. We won't reveal his real book age, but most people know Scholastic published his first book, This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall, when he was 14 years old. Fast forward to present day, and he has created millions of young readers. Gordon Korman is the #1 best-selling author of the 39 Clues series, as well as 8 books in the very popular Swindle series, Restart and War Stories. Gordon's 98th novel, you heard me right, is Linked, and it's available this summer. Linked centers on a quiet town where it's woken up very quickly when someone sneaks into the middle school and vandalizes with the symbol of hate. Gordon delivers his trademark humor with an important message about coming to grips with the past in order to move forward into the future. It is always a mixture of anticipation and excitement to officially introduce a debut author and an incredible new talent to Scholastic and the rest of the world. Everyone, meet Shakirah Bourne. Shakirah is a Bajan author and filmmaker born and raised in Barbados. She enjoys exploring old graveyards, daydreaming, and eating mangoes. Josephine Against the Sea is her debut middle grade contemporary fantasy. I recommend following her on Twitter and watching her unboxing video of Josephine Against the Sea. It just brings you book joy. So go and do that after this event. Now meet Josephine, the most lovable mischief maker in Barbados, in a magical, heartfelt adventure where a young girl must figure out the strange magic her father's girlfriend is using on him and the people in their community. Josephine Against the Sea will whisk you away to a new world, beautifully inspired by Caribbean mythology. We hope this story brings you as much joy and fulfillment as it did for all of us.
Some of my favorite stories are ones that challenge our expectations, take us on great adventures, and show us something new about our world. I am delighted to introduce you to a story that does all of that and more. The Last Gate of the Emperor is an Afrofuturist story that starts off with a scrappy young gamer who finds out that the fantastical stories his uncle has been telling him about kingdoms in the sky and city-raising monsters might not have been just stories, and that Yared might not be who he thought he was either. In a starred review, PW called this an enthralling tale of resilience, family, and bravery that will entertain young sci-fi lovers. It's my great pleasure to introduce you all to not just one, but 2 incredible creators. New York Times bestselling author and Bluebonnet nominee, Kwame Mbalia, and Prince Yoel Makonnen, the great-grandson of Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia. We're so excited to welcome this storytelling duo to the Scholastic family and introduce this epic sci-fi adventure. And last, but certainly not least, I'm thrilled to introduce Francisco X. Stork. He's the author of some of the most thoughtful, thought-provoking young adult novels being published. He's been recognized by the Schneider Family Book Award for Marcello in the Real World, and he received incredible acclaim for Irises and the Memory of Light. Texas, you have recognized him as well. The Last Summer of the Death Warriors was both a Tayshaus and a Texas Lone Star selection, and Francisco was named a Spirit of Texas author for Disappeared. In this new book, Francisco tackles the topics of revenge, anger, guilt, shame, and the cost of our choices. The book has already received a star in Booklist and a 2nd star from Kirkus. In the Kirkus review, they said, Hector is an expertly crafted protagonist, roiling with guilt, grief, and a thirst for violence that threatens to consume him if he doesn't shift his perspective. What starts as a quiet drama quickly escalates to a potent, fiery story while remaining a deep meditation about cycles of violence. A staggering and fearless book. Thank you so much. Welcome to all of our authors. And here we have Shakirah Bourne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shakirah. I'm an author from Barbados, and my background is in adult short fiction and films. So this is my first children's book. I absolutely adore it. It's about 11-year-old Josephine, who's a cricketer, and she just wants her father to just watch her games and be involved in her life, and he's too busy dating. So she creates all of these booby traps for her dates to scare them away until she meets Maurice, who is one woman who does not scare very easily. And so she has to practice all of her bowling skills and persuade everyone's of Maurice's true identity before she loses her dad forever. It's a story that is fun, it's mischievous, it is full of Caribbean folklore, and it addresses the theme of overcoming grief. And I just love it, and I hope you do too.
Awesome, Shakirah. And now, Gordon Corman.
Hi, I'm Gordon Corman. I could not be more thrilled to be back at TLA, this time virtually rather than in person. I am the author of Linked, which is the story of a middle school that is the victim of racist symbolism. In this case, swastikas being painted all around the school. And the students, horrified by this, come up with a plan to combat this by creating a paper chain 6 million links long, representing the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Those of you who might be checking my math are probably thinking, okay, we've got 600 kids in this school. We've got 6 million links in the chain. That's 10,000 links for every kid. No, I knew that, and I knew that that was not actually a possible thing that could happen in a real middle school. What happens really is, I guess the story is that a kind of a YouTube personality takes them under their wing, their cause, and they kind of become a little bit of a viral event. And eventually their effort to make this vast paper chain, the news of it spreads all around the world. They start receiving donations from schools and organizations from all the continents and dozens of countries. So what they ultimately learn is something about the fight for social justice, but also a little bit about fame too, because while it's wonderful that their notoriety through social media and around the internet allows them to accumulate so many millions of links and makes their incredible goal possible, they also realize that there are downsides to being that famous, that notorious, and people who seem to be their friends and allies aren't always what they seem.
Thank you so much, Gordon. And now, Kwame Mbalia.
Hi, everyone. I am thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you so much, not only for inviting myself and Yoel, but for also all the love that you've shown me. If you could see me now, if we would be in person, you would recognize that underneath this beard, I am blushing furiously. So hold that thought in your mind. Last Gate of the Emperor is a book that is near and dear to me because the character Yard is someone who I think many of us, especially the librarians, recognize, right? Someone who might not flourish in every school scenario, in every school environment, in test taking, homework, paying attention in school, not because of lack of interest in the material being presented, but just because not everybody flourishes in that scenario. And he is creative, he is inventive, and eventually throughout the course of this story, he learns about the family that you choose can be just as important as the family that you are born with, and how he has both opportunities to love and cherish those people. And as much as I would love to go on and on and on and on about Yard and the thrilling video game, The Hunt for Caleb's Obelisk that he participates in, and the truths that he learns about himself, I am not the only author of this book. So I am going to literally throw this book off screen to my co-writer.
Hi, TLA. I'm Prince Yoel, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having us. With my co-author, Kwame Mbalia, we're really excited to bring The Last Gate of the Emperor to you all and to all the young readers. We believe it's going to be a truly unique experience for our young readers because it's set in a futuristic Africa in Ethiopia in the future at its prime, where our readers will follow the adventures of young Yared and his bionic lioness and his rival turned unlikely ally, the Ibis, who's an intrepid young girl. And this adventure will take him through this video game that Kwame was referencing to an end that they couldn't have imagined. And they're basically trying to avert this massive catastrophe from happening. And so what's beautiful about it, though, is that even though it's in a fantastical setting, it actually references a real place and real people and has a lot of the rich history of Ethiopia embedded in it from the royal dynasty that spans 3,000 years. And all of that is made very accessible with this sci-fi adventure setting. So it'll be very exciting because it's massively entertaining, but it's also educational.
Thank you, Kwame and Yoel. And now Francisco.
Hi, I'm Francisco Stork, and I'm the author of On the Hook, and I'm very happy to be back in Texas again. I wish it was in person. One of the reasons I write books is just that I could get invited to places like TLA and to see you, but maybe next time. On the Hook is a story of Hector Robles. He's 16 years old. He's a sophomore in high school. He's extremely intelligent, on his way to being the captain of his chess team. He's got his future kind of mapped out. He wants to be an engineer. And his biggest goal really is to get his family, his brother and his mother and his younger sister, out of the projects of El Paso, Texas, where he lives. It's a dangerous place, and Hector has to stay under the radar, but it doesn't really work that well because Joey, the brother of the local drug dealer, signals him and threatens his life and says, I may not kill you today, but I'm going to kill you one of these days. And so things begin to unravel for Hector. He's no longer able to hide, and eventually things happen so that Hector and Joey end up in the same reform school in San Antonio. And there they kind of have to work out their destiny together. And Hector has to deal with this kind of obsessive hate that he has for this evil young person that he must share space with. And eventually, I think that it is a learning experience for both Hector to what to do with this, to what is the true meaning of courage, and how is courage manifested in ways other than violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was amazing to hear about your books from you. There's nothing like hearing from the authors, and we want to get a little deeper into discussion. So just to kick things off, to start us off, we want to celebrate and thank all of our librarians for everything that they've done. Everything you've done, librarians, over the past year, over your entire careers, for students and for readers, it's incredible. Authors, do you have any stories to share about libraries, school libraries, public libraries, or any message that you want to share with our wonderful Texas librarian attendees? Let's start off with Francisco.
My books are the type of books that I don't think they would end up in the hands of young people unless there was a librarian who sees a young person and says, I think I have the right book for him or her. So I'm really very grateful for you for doing that. If I had a story to share, I guess when I was in high school, I remember Mrs. Watson sort of finding out somehow that I had aspirations to be a writer. And she made me a list of all the books that I should read or that in order to be an author, and she started off with Antigone. And I think she ended off with Zorba the Greek, but it was 4 pages long, and I started. It took me a few years to get through with it, but I'm very grateful for somebody recognizing, that I wanted to be an author and taking the time to helping.
That's amazing. Gordon, let's go to you next.
I think that the thing that the months of the pandemic have kind of taught me is that librarians will stop at absolutely nothing to get books in the hands of readers. And I can't tell you how many messages and emails I've gotten that said things like, we have 600 copies of Restart and they're locked in our library storeroom and we can't get them because the school's locked down. And the things, librarians have sort of organized elaborate heists to get their books out of lockdown. And when they couldn't, they've done things like done massive read alouds over Zoom, and in some cases, not just done read alouds posted to Facebook pages, but also gotten permission to do that, which is legally not the easiest thing in the world to swing. So we've always been grateful to librarians for these incredible lengths they'll go to connect kids and books. But I think over the last year, we've seen it in spades.
Okay, Shakirah, I'm going to pass it on to you now.
I don't think I would be a reader or a writer without librarians. I first discovered the library when I was about 10 or 11. It was a very small library, so I went through the children's books very quickly. And so I kind of wandered over to the adult books, and I found historical romance novels. And I took a bundle of them to borrow. I was 10 at the time. And the librarian was like, how old are you? And, I told her, and I said, but I've read all of the children's books. And she looked so torn. Like, she was torn between wanting me to read and then also knowing that it probably wasn't appropriate for a 10-year-old to be reading historical romances. But she let me borrow them anyway. And let me tell you, my eyes were opened. But I do have to say that reading historical romances kind of was a gateway to reading more complex novels. I moved on to crime, I moved on to thriller. And I was confused at time with some of the romance content. I remember asking a friend, like, what is a man's member? Like, member of what? I was so confused. But full disclaimer, there is none of that content in my middle grade fantasy, but I certainly learned a lot of things through those books.
That's amazing. Any pathway we can get to get kids reading, it sounds like you found your pathway. Kwame, you look ready to talk now. Are you ready?
That is unfair. You can't. Shakira can't go in front of me anymore. That's not fair. 3 things that I will count down about librarians that have been touch points in my life. The first, my mother would take us every Friday to the Martin Luther King Library on North Avenue and Locust Street in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and would tell us get as many books as you wanted to read, because they were supposed to last us to the next week. They would last me the weekend because she continued to encourage me to read, and that library was central to my growth, my love of reading. Second, in high school, 9th grade, I did not know anyone, contrary to what you may believe, about this bubbly, extroverted exterior. I was shy as all get out. And I found my comfort, my safe space in the high school librarian, where it was not allowed, food was not allowed in the library, but the librarian, Miss Polly, recognizing something, said, eat your lunch in here, surround yourself with what makes you comfortable. All of these books, I would pull 12 off of the shelf, figure out what I wanted to do, never staining them with, my turkey and bacon sandwiches or whatever. But she made me feel safe until I could grow into this new experience, this new world that I had been, entered into. That's 2. 3, Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky was completely 98% written in the Northeast Regional Library here in Wake County. When I couldn't write at home just because I would be distracted, and it was just down the street from my daycare, so I could just swing by and pick up my then 3-year-old daughter. So libraries have always been a part of my life. As soon as I move to a new place, I find the local library. I make friends with the local librarian because they are the ones who are not only, it's a two-way street. They are going to put my books into the hands of the people that need them most. And they're going to be like, hey, Kwame, I know you like this. Let me give you this historical romance that Shakira recommended.
Perfect. And Yoel.
Yeah, librarians are just everything to young children. I think they're part of the superhero team, including teachers. And I will share one of my fondest memory. I must have been in the 4th grade, and I had a very good friend. Her mom was the librarian of our school. And so in our last period, we had a free period, and we used to go and hang out at the library. And I remember my friend, she would always go and get a book and read, and I would just be there drawing and like bothering her and, you know, eating candy. And I remember her mom one time came to me, the librarian, and she handed me a book, so I grew up in Europe, and the book was The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And obviously it was supposed to be ironic a little bit, like a wink to me. But I remember that book is basically the one that made me fall in love with reading. And so after that, I was just really enthralled into that book, that story, and many others. So librarians mean so much. I feel like they are there to help you grow, to help you open your mind. And that's so vital. And I celebrate them and honor them. Thank you for all you do, including all of you at TLA.
I love hearing all those stories. I feel like we have one, but there's so many more that we can pull out of our pocket. And Shakira, I hate bringing this back to us, but I had a similar experience in my neighborhood growing up in the Bronx. My library was a safe haven. I still remember like the smell of the carpet and it being in this, finding my little nook to sit on in the spinner rack, and historical romance was one of them at one point in time. I just reread it. It was just, reading is reading, right? Reading is reading. So thank you for sharing all those stories. I know there's more. With this second question, we want to talk about your writing process. What are the sort of things that came easy to you, and what are some of the challenges you faced? Did your book end up being what you thought it would be when you first started? Gordon, we're going to start with you.
I remember once being at a library conference, possibly even a TLA, and it's always strange when adult services people are there because, it's a weird notoriety when you write for kids. Your books can be really popular, but no one over the age of 14 has the faintest idea who you are. And I remember running into this lady who just sort of looked at my book and finally said, well, precisely what is your message in producing this material? And I kind of blanked because I'm really not a message guy, but I just had to say something. So I eventually just said, well, I guess my message is lighten up. And I said it to kind of get out of a jam, but the more I thought about it, I was kind of a lighten up guy. So for me to write Linked, a book that talks about anti-Semitism and racism, it was uncomfortable at first. I was really outside my comfort zone, which I think is a great thing for writers to do. I think you always are a little bit better and sharper as a writer when you feel like you could mess it up, like it's possible that you are not going to be able to make this happen. I think what I did with Linked was, in addition to being a book that deals with some pretty serious themes, it really was also a caper. They were trying to create this gigantic paper chain, 6 million links. And so whenever I sort of felt like I was getting a little bit too serious or maybe preachy or didactic, I always came back to the basic kind of caper of they're trying to do something really, really big here. Are they going to make it?
That's great. I'm looking at my squares here. Francisco.
Actually, On the Hook was it's kind of an interesting history because it was I wrote my first YA novel. It was in 2006, and it's really that's the basis for On the Hook. The rights kind of reverted to me after a few years, and then so Scholastic bought them, and I was able to have a second chance of rewriting this book. In 2016, I wrote a revision that didn't seem to be right either, and in 2016, I wrote another revision, didn't seem to be right, and then I got to writing these. I put the book aside and started writing other books, and the last two books that I wrote before On the Hook were in the category of thrillers, with a lot of suspense and a lot of mystery and problems to solve. And I think that I had to learn that aspect of the craft, I think, before I could go back and finish the content that was already there and On the Hook. And it was almost like, there was a journey myself that I had to go through before I could make this book more of a complete book. This is it. I won't rewrite it anymore. I think that I finally got it to where I wanted it to be. Thank you.
Yeah, we're grateful for you creating the story. It's remarkable. All right, Kwame, you well?
The easy part for me was writing a smart mouth kid. I don't know what that says about me, but the character of Yared, the personality, that was actually the easy part. Someone who bounced around schools, someone who, school was a job, right? School was something that we had to attend because there was nothing engaging there. Someone who snuck off to play video games. So that writing that character at the beginning and then that character arc, that growth for Yared, that was probably the easy part. The most difficult part, I think, would be, and this is the case, I think, in a lot of sci-fi and in a lot of fantasy, but in the sci-fi, it's like imagining, like extrapolating what the technology is like and how it is, how it has naturally evolved, like, to some extent. Like, I can't just be like, oh, they had, a tablet there. Like, we have tablets now, like 20 years ago, you'd be like, oh, they had a tablet. But now it's like everyone has a tablet. I have a small tablet right here that does, the computing, has the computing power of what I'm streaming on or whatever. So it's like extrapolating out of the technology and doing it in a way that, people won't come after us afterwards. Like, that doesn't make sense. That's illogical. I think that was one of the more difficult parts. And then more specifically, it's like I play video games. I play a lot of video games. And so you're like, writing about video games, that'll be easy. But doing it in a way so where the video game actually feels fun and engaging and not just like, why would anyone play that, but it's almost like you have to design a video game that will never be built, physically in the real world, and thinking about, what are the game mechanics, how does it, how do we level up? How does it feel fun? What are the rewards? Are there loot boxes and all of this sort of, things that I'm, looking forward to when I actually sit down and play a video game, and that students and kids and readers of the book will be like, yeah, that sounds like I would play that, so that's what was difficult for me. Yoel, I don't know what was easy, what was difficult for you?
So what was really easy, I think, is when at the initiation, when we met, I feel like we just hit it off right away. We both had so much in common, and more importantly, the part about growing up steeped in these stories about Africa. And I know I wanted to really do an ode to Africa and to Ethiopia. And I know that Kwame was like so like into it too. So I think just our energy, our love for what we were doing, our passion for introducing young readers to another part of the world was really easy and exciting. I think as the story evolved, I found that also what made it so easy also is Kwame is the smart mouth kid who knows exactly how they think. And you know, for me, what was hard is that I wanted the book to do so much all at once, because I really tapped deep into my own personal experience of, I grew up as a prince in exile, and I wanted to imbue that kind of experience in a child and explain how you process that. But that can be very heavy. And I think that it was so great working with Kwame to kind of make that light and accessible and fun. And the world building was just amazing. Like all the ideas that were coming to create this just unique world where technology permeates, and there's some good aspects of that, there's some bad aspects of that, and how a kid can find his own way by doing what he loves, which is playing video games. And so I think we really achieved that. And Lizette really, what I imagined the book to be and what it became, I think has actually turned out even much better than what I thought. So I'm really excited for you guys to discover what Kwame and I have been working on and explore the last gate of the Emperor world.
That got me hyped all over again. So we blow the confetti in the air. We were in a ballroom for all of your books. Shakirah, love to hear your personal takeaway on this question.
Writing this book was very interesting. It was like a sprint from beginning to end. Basically, I decided to write a story for a children's book competition called the Bourne Award for Caribbean literature. It was going to be my first children's novel, and at the time, it was 3 weeks before the deadline. And I had a project that had just been canceled, and I was like, well, I'm doing nothing for 3 weeks. And I had read an interview with a previous finalist, and she said that she completed her book in 2 weeks. So I was like, okay, I have an extra week. I can do this. So I basically sat down, I brainstormed the idea for a story and the character. Luckily, there was a seed planted there since I was 12, because in English class, I had read this story about a fisherman who saw a mermaid on a rock combing her hair, and he became totally obsessed to the point where he stopped taking care of himself, his family, he didn't sleep. And at the end of the story, they just found his clothes by the riverbank, and he was never seen again, or the mermaid. And I remember thinking at that time, what happened to that fisherman? I need to know. So I guess 20 years later, I finally was able to tell my own version of what happened to him. So I had the idea. I assigned myself a word limit daily, and I swear for that 3 weeks, it was a terrible time. I barely slept. My family hardly saw me. I remember them pushing Post-it notes under the door to make sure I was still alive. And I basically I completed that story. I actually finished it. And I think the good thing about the sprint is that there was not time for self-doubt, imposter syndrome. There was no time for overthinking anything. I just had to finish. And I have never written anything so quickly again, right? So I think by the time it was finished, it was about 140 pages, which is about 30,000 words. And that was an accomplishment for me because I was a short story writer, and I never thought I would be able to stick with one story for so long. By the time it was finished, it's triple that. And so the story became more developed. It has the same bones, but more fleshed out, more action, more mischievous encounters. And I just learned so much from that process. Like I guess I didn't realize I would be with the story for so long, because again, it was just a challenge. And after that, the book became a finalist for the competition. I got my agent around the same time, and suddenly I am a children's book writer. And I couldn't understand how that happened, because if you told me 3 years ago that I would be writing for children, I mean, come on, look at my background. I was reading historical romances when I was 11. So I never had like the thinking of writing for children on my mind, but I don't know why it took me so long to get here. Maybe because, I didn't read enough children's books. But it's probably some of the most pleasurable writing I've ever done.
Oof. I feel like we've reached a great crescendo to this talk and the event. Please, our last conclusion and question for y'all, which you sort of addressed in these questions, but speaking of readers' takeaway, like you said, Kwame, and others, like everyone's have their own interpretation and grabbed into something that really just elevated that experience for them. And I also really am inspired by, thank you for really talking about more in depth about the writing process, that research, those kind of hidden stories, because when it comes to us and when we share with our viewers today, your books, you guys, these books have ignited that within us, which is why you're all here today. So it's just remarkable to me, this journey, honestly, to hear you guys talk about that, how the story of that for each of you, and then how these books came to be, and then reading it and having the mind-blowing effect of these amazing stories. So just want to pause and say thank you. Just thank you for that. And I can't wait for everyone else to enjoy a copy as well. So speaking of our readers, so let's focus on one thing. What do you hope readers will take away after reading your book?
The story deals with hatred, really. And in a way, because hatred has been so pervasive in our lives in the past few years. It's just become more open. In some ways, I see it as being more kind of acceptable. Sometimes it's justified because what we hate is something that we consider wrong. But it's still hatred, and this boy is hooked. He's hooked on hate. And so it's kind of a meditation on how do you stop from hating? You can't just say I'm not going to hate anymore. There has to be a process involved there, and so I think that to look at that process that this young man went through, I think is something that and to reflect upon it is something that I hope that the reader will take away from it and somehow incorporate into their lives, because I think that, when we're honest with ourselves, we all carry some hatred within us.
And that discovery of your own self-actualization of that as a person, and those type of things that help you, tools, figuring that out, who you are. Gordon?
Yeah, well, Linked, like many of my books lately, has been told by a number of different characters. And when you narrate a book from many different perspectives, I think one of the coolest things is you can really explore how different people can look at exactly the same events and see something completely different. And so I think one of the takeaways I would love readers to have from Linked is just the idea that imperfect people can do really, really good things, and I think that when I come back to what Shakirah said about falling in love with her antagonist, when I think about the characters who I feel the most sorry for in Linked, I think they're the characters who probably deserve the least sympathy. And yet just telling the story from different perspectives, I think just gets you thinking that way. But certainly Linked is definitely an imperfect kind of character. But there's also, the student government nerd who really just loves the paper chain because she's dying to get everybody involved. And there's the art club president who, he's just, suddenly his art club is important because they need it to make this paper chain, and even the video blogger who kind of makes them famous. He's basically kind of like an internet sleazeball, but at the same time, if it weren't for him, there's no way that what they were doing could have gotten the kind of attention and notoriety that would have enabled people to know about them and send them donations and eventually push them over that kind of magical threshold of 6 million links. So that would be my takeaway, would be that just imperfect people are still able to accomplish fantastic things.
That's so good. And also, I think lessons in advocacy and how to be an ally. So that's great. Yoel?
Yeah, I love that, Gordon. Imperfect people can do amazing things, because I think that's a main takeaway that I hope our readers will latch on to Yared's adventure, to see that he's just a child. He's just like a kid. He doesn't do everything right. He doesn't want to follow the rules. But he has this fierce belief in himself, where he actually believes he can change his circumstances and wants to believe in the stories that kind of inspire him. And the fact that he goes after his goal of being the best HKO, which is the Hunt for Caleb's Obelisk, which you'll discover in the book, his augmented reality game, that he goes for it. He knows he's really good at it. And I think as kids, sometimes if something doesn't seem very academic or formal, you're kind of discouraged from that. But I love that Yared takes it on and says, I'm the best, and I'm going to, help my family and be number one, and the whole city will cheer me on. So that I think would be great for young readers' takeaways, to have this belief in yourself. And then just a personal takeaway, a personal desire of mine that people take away is also that by reading this, even though they're entertained and that they love the adventure and the sci-fi fantasy, it's also based in a true country, which is Ethiopia. And so I hope that it'll spark their curiosity to learn even more afterwards. There's references in there. Just know that you will get a lot of historical references in there, so you will be quite knowledgeable by the end of that. But, search even more, because Ethiopia is one of those great civilizations in Africa and in the world, but it's not as known as, the empires of China or Japan or the Roman Empire. And I think it's important for people to know it. And I think they'll find that it's pretty rich and as epic as all these other ones.
Absolutely. I learned so much too. Ethiopia culture and through that book. So thank you. Kwame?
I mean, it's really just piggybacking off of everything that Yoel said. In addition, Africa, Africa, we want an appreciation of the Africa and the African diaspora. That's what we want to take away, right? As someone who is a huge science fiction fan and a huge fantasy fan, right? We have been shown and been fed the traditional and normalized kind of Western and European iconography and setting for fantasy. And then when we look into the future, because of what I now realize is specific casting call directives and looking for people to fulfill roles. When we talk about all of these science fiction movies that take place in the future and looking for people who look like me, I am so ready to take, this book around the world and show, hey, this is a fantastical future where we exist, right? And you can come along too, and we can all have fun, because centering does not mean exclusion. And so I'm listen, Africa is here. The African diaspora is here. We are ready in fantasy and science fiction. You're going to eat some boosters in the future. You're going to drink Tej in the future. Listen, it's going to be great, and you're going to have fun. You're going to play video games. It's going to be wonderful. So all I want these readers to take away is Africa and appreciation for it.
Preach.
All right, we started with Shakirah. We're going to have you have the last answer last, but not least.
First, I just want to say, I wish that Kwame could be my hype person when I'm writing. Could you record yourself going, you can do it, you can finish this chapter? I think that would be amazing, while I'm writing. I just needed to get that out of the way. And I just have to say, completely agree with you and Yoel. I don't know of many middle grade books set in Barbados. Definitely can't think of one set in Barbados. I mean, in the Caribbean, and I can't think of one set in Barbados. So I would be introducing readers to my culture. And I hope that they can see that it's more than, the sun, the sand, the beaches, a stop on a cruise ship. I want them to get to know the people, the dialect, the language, and just know more about the culture. So that would be my one takeaway. I also want them to realize the importance of the daddy-daughter relationship. I don't think a lot people focus on it in terms of a positive light. And there's a really strong bond between daughter and father. So I hope that they realize it's more about, it's not just about providing food and shelter, keeping your children alive. It is about talking, sharing emotions, talking and communicating your feelings. So I hope they take that away. Last, I would love to talk about connecting, how we connect to each other as people, especially with the Black diaspora. We are scattered all over the world, but our shared history and our shared folklore just brings us together. I get excited whenever I see something that I recognize, or if there's a manifestation of something that I know in my culture and I see it in another book. Tristan Strong is a great example of that. I remember reading about the Mumosha, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which are forest dwellers. They have backward feet. They live in the forest and they whistle. And we have something similar here called the Dwen, who are children who died before they're baptized. They have backward feet, and they say your name and you get lost in the forest. But I've never been to Ghana. But when I read that, I was like, I felt so close to that country. So it's just, I hope people can realize how our shared history and stories bring us together and connect us. And honestly, I think despite all of this, if people have a laugh or they just have fun reading the book, then I think I've accomplished my goal.
That's amazing. Shakira, I feel like you ended on the perfect note. Just the idea of connection and the idea that the knowledge that these books bring us, the fun that they bring us, the inspiration through the beautiful writing that you guys have all done, and the fun and the introspection and all of that brings us together. And Texas librarians, we can't be with you in person, but we are with you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested in these authors' amazing books. Thank you for sharing them with your readers. We are at TLA. Come visit us in the booth. Come find out more about our Power of Story books and so many more wonderful things. We can't wait to see you, give you Texas elbow hugs or real hugs, and have a wonderful rest of your TLA.
Thank you for being here, everybody. And thanks to all of you. Bye.